Learn how to create images like this one in Midjourney. Welcome to an entirely new segment on this channel called Watch Me Prompt, where I go off script and show you how I prompt live on screen, where you can see all my trial and errors, all of the mistakes I make, how I solve certain problems, and take you behind the scenes of how to prompt in Midjourney. Welcome back. So today I could probably start talking about GPT-4 like everybody else is doing. But to be honest, since everybody is doing it already, I really don't want to waste your time. I cannot be bothered to come up with some ideas that everybody's already talked about. You have probably tried out GPT-4 yourself. So instead today, I'm going to do something completely off script. And I emphasize off script because, well, usually on all my videos, I write a script for the video in order to make sure that you don't have any of the fluff and you literally just get all the nice nuggets about all the insights. So today what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to record this video. It's still going to be edited afterwards, so we'll cut out all of the unnecessary stuff. But essentially, I'm just going to do some prompting and you're going to watch me do it. I think that might be quite insightful, mainly because you'll learn a little bit about how I approach things. And I think you'll also get an idea of how you usually prompt, like, because most people just, when they share their prompts, it conveys the idea that they just came up with this prompt and all of a sudden everything worked perfectly fine. That's not how prompting works. It's very much trial and error, a lot like coding, actually. So what I'm going to do today is I've been wanting to change the banners on my YouTube channel and my Twitter account simply to reflect a little bit more what I'm doing in recent days. So what I'm going to do today is I'm simply going to create some nice artwork that I'll use for my new banners. And I'll also show you how I edit them in Affinity Designer or Affinity Photo, whichever you use. So let's get right started. I'm going to close these tabs real quick and I'm going to go back into my personal little prompting space. And what I want to do is, if you look at my social profiles, I have this little slogan where I say that I'm exploring the edges of AI, tokenization, and the creator economy. So I'd like to have an image that reflects the idea of someone exploring and discovering new horizons. The things that immediately come to mind for me are, an explorer, somebody like a captain who's out at sea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with something very simple, and I wanted to have a digital art style. And what I'm going to do is I also wanted to have a wide angle shot, and it's going to be a captain standing on a cliff in the distant ocean. Let's see how that looks. I'm not going to add any aspect ratio right now because I just want to get a quick idea of what kind of images it'll give me. Okay, so this is pretty nice. This is pretty much what I had in mind. So let's build on top of that. I'm going to add something. Sorry, I forgot to copy my prompt here. I actually want to add something regarding the colors. I usually use the colors teal and yellow in all of my designs. So what I'll do is I'm going to add teal and gold color scheme. Gold because I want something slightly warmer. Look at this one. All right, cool. So this already covers a lot more of the color scheme that I like. I noticed one thing. I had an error in my prompt. I actually wanted standing on a cliff looking in the distant ocean. So let's quickly make that adjustment and have a quick look. And what you see here now is a very common problem that tends to come up whenever you use digital art as a word. Very frequently, what Midjourney will do is it will show you these images portrayed in form of a canvas or in a frame. I think this is mostly from sort of e-commerce sites and print-on-demand sites. So I don't really want this. So the way to avoid this is by turning your original prompt into a first segment of a multi-prompt, which I do by adding these two colons, and then I say canvas, frame, another two colons, but then I add a negative weight, which tells Midjourney that I do not want to see any of this. This usually actually works, so let's have a quick look. Okay, cool. So these images look real great. The only thing that bothers me about this is that, first of all, my captain is starting to turn into a Captain America kind of guy, like a superhero. I do not want that. I actually want a ship captain. And the other thing is I'd like to add something like a lighthouse to the image. So what I'll do is I'm going to add to my prompt simply ship captain instead of just captain. And I'm also going to add ship captain standing on a cliff looking at lighthouse in the distant ocean. That should be fine. I'm going to leave all the rest. Okay, cool. So this looks quite nice. The only problem is that we're now constrained by the dimensions of the image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do two things. First of all, I'm going to add the aspect ratio parameter at the end, and I'm going to add a 16:9 ratio. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add one slight adjustment to the first segment of the prompt, which is I want to have an image that's more like futuristic. So I'm going to add the word futuristic interpretation, and then we'll have a look at what that gives us. Okay, so these look really awesome. The futuristic interpretation, however, is maybe a bit too odd. I'm not sure. This is something that is often referred to as, I think, retrofuturism. So what we might want to do is we might want to try this by replacing it with the word retrofuturism instead. I think we'll get slightly nicer images that way. So let me give that a try. I'm going to replace the word futuristic interpretation with retrofuturism. And the reason why I think this might work a bit well is because retrofuturism is a term that is actually very well defined in the art space. And you've all seen it before. If you've watched the movie Snowpiercer, it's not entirely perfect, but that has a little bit of a retrofuturism aspect to it, where basically the art style shows you stuff that is really, really futuristic, and it doesn't exist in today's world, but it has a very retro-like futuristic style. I can't really describe it. So instead, what I'm going to do is, let me quickly show you an image of what that looks like. I'm going to throw that on the screen right here, right now. And as you can see, this is what you would refer to as retrofuturism. I think you get a pretty good idea. Okay, so let's get back to my prompt. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use that side adjustment, and let's have a look at what we get. All right, cool. So this is already slightly better than what I had before, but I'm still not quite happy. I actually want this to be more futuristic, like kind of cityscapes, Blade Runner style. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the retrofuturism, but in the prompt, I'll add retrofuturism and cyberpunk as a part of the prompt. And I'm pretty sure we're going to get something pretty different. Let's have a look. Okay, so I stand slightly corrected, even though I am pretty sure that we have more elements of cyberpunk in here now. As you can see in these images, there is more of a technical aspect, mechanical aspect to these images. You see, retrofuturism will usually have smoother, curved shapes. They're still present in these images. However, we can also see lots of more detailed lights in these structures. So I'm pretty sure it did get through. However, I do think we may have to make an adjustment to our prompt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an additional segment, which will simply repeat these words retrofuturism and cyberpunk. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to emphasize that I do not want the typical color scheme from cyberpunk, which is like dark blues and reds and some teal, but I'm going to emphasize that I want teal and gold colors for this segment as well. Now, just as a test, I'm going to leave the weight at 1, but my gut feeling tells me this might be too strong. But let's have a look. All right, so I think I was right. So as much as we still have a person that might be a captain, who knows, who's looking at into the distance, there's no more lighthouse, not even anything that's remotely similar to it. There's tons of technical, mechanical, very edgy sort of structures in the image. And I think that's coming from the cyberpunk element. So what I think we might have to do is I'm going to change our prompt again one more time, but all I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the weight of our prompt, or sorry, of our second segment to 0.5. And what I'm also going to do is I'm also going to change the aspect ratio to 2:1, simply because I want the widest possible aspect ratio that Midjourney supports. The reason why I want this is simply because I'm creating a banner. And if I only have a square or just like a 3:2 aspect ratio, I'm not going to be able to fit much of it into my banner shape. This way, I just get the widest possible shape, and it reduces the amount of editing that I need to do afterwards. But let's have a real quick look at what these images give us. This is much closer to what I was looking for. This is actually pretty much the exact weighting that I want. I still have an ocean. I still have a captain standing looking into the distance. And yes, my lighthouse isn't quite what I'm looking for yet. However, remember, there's absolutely no shame in re-rolling. One of the most important parts of Midjourney is that no one actually gets everything right on their first prompt. So it's totally fine and normal to re-roll until you actually get the variation that you like. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to re-roll this very same prompt a couple of times until I do find the one that I really like. And when I do, I'll show it to you. So before we move on to the one that I actually picked, let me quickly show you a few examples of images that I got from re-rolling. And as you can see amongst these images, re-rolling is really, really important, simply because it will give you so many different variations, so many different compositions. So even though your first prompt may not be exactly what you wanted, that does not mean that you need to change anything about your prompt. Sometimes you just need to keep going until you actually find the variation that you want. And so don't overthink things. Don't think that you need to add some weird sort of parameters or special words into your prompt. Usually that's not it. You just need to keep going. Okay, so let me now show you the one that I actually picked. I really liked these two here. So the one on the top left here and the one on the bottom left. These are the ones that I really, really, really liked, because they really show you the sort of the vast expanse between the character and the objects in the distance. And it also has a nice balance of the colors that I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually upscale both of these, and I'll see whether I can use both of them in my banners. So let me quickly upscale, and I'll see you in a second. Okay, so now that I have my upscaled images, I'm going to open up this one in the browser. And a lot of people keep saying that, oh, what are you doing? You can just right click and copy this link. Well, let me show you something. If I do this and I only copy this link from the preview image and I open this in a browser, well, you'll notice there are query string parameters at the end. And what they do is they actually tell the server to reduce the size of the image. So it's actually making them smaller than they are. And that is why I always open the full size image just to make sure that I get the highest resolution there is. So what I then do is I go over to Affinity Designer and I will simply open which one I'm going to do? I'm going to start off with, let's do my LinkedIn banner. So what I'll do is I'll simply paste this in here, and then I reduce the size. I'm going to flip this around simply because I want the colors to be the other way around. And then this is where I start. This is a template that I've used in the past for creating my LinkedIn banner. And so I can just simply reuse it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the layer of my Midjourney image on top. I'm going to reduce the size so that I get most of the context in there. And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to add a simple layer, or it's more of an object actually, a rectangular box here. I'm then going to use the color picker to adjust the color of that box that's closest to the colors that I see here on the edge, because I'm not going to be able to get the exact color codes that I use for my brand usually, right? So instead, I want this to blend as closely as possible, but we still have this border here that's bothering me a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this rectangle And I'm going to make it a bit smaller. I'll shift it over here. Let me just make it even thinner. So what I'm going to do now is now select this. I'll go into the layer effects, and in the layer effects, I'll select gradient overlay. Now, obviously this doesn't look too great because I need to change the colors of the gradient to the colors that I want. And here, I actually want the same color for both sides. However, I'm going to reduce the opacity of the right side, if you wish, to transparent. Then I adjust the fill opacity to 0. And then this is where I start playing around with these things just until I get the value that I actually, no, sorry, not the value, but just until this actually fits. So the tricky part here is that you need to find the right spot where it covers most of the hard borderline, but you also don't want too much. So I might actually have to widen this even further. And then you'll see that it's not doing what I actually want it to do. Ha ha ha. Right, so this is not as smooth as I want it to be. It's not perfect, right? So, but you can adjust it further until it's as smooth as you can sort of get it. The other alternative is to sort of shift around the actual gradient itself, but personally I'm not a big fan of this because it honestly doesn't always work. So I think I'm going to leave it at this, except that I'm going to see if I can nudge the angle a little bit. Whoops, and let me see if I can get an angle here that is actually, that suggests a smoother transition. And I think this is actually quite nice. So I'm going to stick with this slight angle. And then over here, let me steal a bit of font from an earlier version. And now I'm just going to say something, stay curious. And for this, I'll use a different font. I'm going to need 2 of these. So for this font, I will use, what's it called? Rustico. Yeah. So I'll use this, which looks a little bit more artsy. And then for this part, which I'll call create, I will simply use my regular font. And then I'll pick a color from within this image as the color for the accent. And I think while you can probably still continue working on this and make some more adjustments, maybe even add a pattern here in the background on the left side, this actually already works. And you would already have a finished LinkedIn banner to update your profile. So I think I'm going to leave it at this because doing the same thing for different banners isn't going to do much for you. You're not going to learn anything else. So if you enjoy this kind of stuff, I'm going to be recording more of these off-script watch me prompt type of videos. And they will very often be the kind of content that I also share on my Twitter profile or in the YouTube community tab on my channel. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a comment, like, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Keep learning and take care.